interactivity, and specifically I'm going to talk about multi-touch solution and what you need to know about multi-touch. The agenda of the presentation, we are going to go through some of the top touch trends in the market, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the ecosystem, because it's not just about touchscreen, it's about the software, it's about the hardware, and it's about the complete system. And I'm going to go through some of the case studies, particularly in the retail area, that have already implemented multi-touch capability in self-service application, transactional kiosk, and so on. So first of all, to start the subject, to give you a kind of summary of what we're talking about, I'm going to show you a video which really covers a bit the history of the touch solution and the touch experience. So we start from what is called the single touch experience, which is really a button replacement kind of application that you might find in traditional POS, POP devices. We move to what is called a two-touch experience. You are probably more familiar with some of the more the tablet devices and so on. And with 3M, we move much more beyond the two-touch experience with the full multi-touch. What you see on the video is a very advanced application, very interesting application. You already see from the videos we are not talking about just advanced gesture, but we're talking about multiple users, multiple touch points. So that's actually a picture of the technology in action, with multiple users touching at the same time at a very quick rate. And you can see that the digital content becomes much more immersive, and you can actually interact with the screen in a much different way than you are perhaps used, which also means the GUI, the graphical user interface, needs to be different. And from that point of view, you know, a lot of the companies like Apple and Microsoft have done a lot with their latest operating system. You know, with the next operating system, actually Windows 8, Microsoft will support full multi-touch, and the use of the operating system and the graphical user interface will change dramatically. That's an application with a mapping system, again, where you can find the details. So you can see multiple users working around the layers in a very intuitive way. And, you know, digital content, you know, moving pictures, collaborating between people, zooming, rotating, and passing information becomes very intuitive and very natural. Beyond that, there are some leading applications. So this is actually a music mixer, where you move away from the traditional mechanical buttons into much more sophisticated and easier to use menus. And this is another application which is new. It's a CAD application where you actually interact with multiple fingers. In this case, you're looking at 3 fingers to actually modify or change the content, so you can easily see how that can be moved into a retail application as well, where you are perhaps modifying some of the items you see in the shops and so on. So really the message is, imagine the possibility of multi-touch. The technology enables you to do these advanced applications, and you know, it's not anymore just interacting with single buttons, but it's really having a full immersive experience with the touchscreen. So just to summarize on some of the terminology, when we're talking about single touch, is really you are only capable of touching with one finger, so you are kind of limited on what you can do. Dual touch is what you are perhaps more used to, with the zooming and rotating and this kind of stuff. And multi-touch is really defining 3 or more touch, reacting in very quickly, so in less than 10 milliseconds, to be able to actually have that natural user interface. So when we move away from the terminology, the key megatrends that are related to multi-touch and the multi-touch ecosystems are one is the capability of interacting with the display with multiple touch points, but also is about the industrial design. That's the fundamental part of what the retailers are looking for. Not anymore if you think about the iPhone 4 as an example, that's a classic industrial design, which is very nice to see and appealing to the retailer. The last but not least of the trends is the natural user interface. So the capability, whether it's the latest generation or an older generation, to be able to interact with a computer in a very natural way. So if we look at these megatrends, individually, multi-touch is not just about touching with multiple fingers, but is having more user-friendly and for multiple people to interact with the display. The industrial design is not just about the design itself of the complete device, but is about the flat front surface, the black virtual bezel, and the fact that you can clean easily the surface because you don't have anymore a bezel where dirt accumulation can happen and things like that. And the last part, the natural user interface, is the intuitive way of interacting with the display. So just to give you some perspective in what I'm talking about, if we're talking about industrial design, you can see easily an example here, a more traditional phone with mechanical buttons, a display, and the latest advanced smartphone where you have an iPhone 4S with a completely flat cover glass. You don't have anymore the rig that was available on the iPhone 3, and it's easy to be cleaned, and it's nice to look, it's appealing. What is important about the iPhone 4 is not so much the phone itself, but the fact that a consumer device is actually bringing a trend into the business-to-business environment. So up there you see a traditional point-of-sale system, which has a chunky bezel, and down there you see the new design of the POS system, which is a completely flat front surface, easy to clean, and a nice-looking virtual black bezel, just like the iPhone or the iPad or any smartphone that you see and tablet you see today in the market. Natural user interface is really the terms that we use when we talk about the new way to interface yourself with the display. You don't need to learn how to use the display. You naturally know how to use it. How many times you see people today approaching a display that maybe is a single touch, wanting to actually zoom in or to rotate, and that's really coming, from the iPad apps into real application in retail and other type of application where you are collaborating and you're expecting the kind of easy, intuitive way of interacting with the display. Whether you are the new generation or an older generation, you might not be used to the computer, you still are able to interact with the computer itself. What is important is that when we're talking about this, we're not just talking about the touchscreen itself. We're talking about an ecosystem. In the ecosystem, we have the software. So 20 years ago, we started with DOS, with the line coding. Nowadays, Windows relatively recently has moved with the Windows 7 and will move even further with the Windows 8 in a completely different type of menu and interface, so that will enable the software to be designed in a much more intuitive way. Hardware interface is the same things. As I was mentioned, single touch devices moving to all-in-one system, dual touch, and now today you can see on our stand the 90, the full multi-touch capabilities. Applications, we moved from keyboard to menu kind of interaction to much more circular type of menu and natural, easy to use menus. So the key multi-touch visible trends and applications are seen in the consumer market, whether it's the iPhone or the iPads, and they are now moving quickly into the business applications. So applications designed by software companies, independent software vendors are already available that work in the multifunction way. And the end user are exposed to this technology, so they do expect to interact that way with the latest displays. So that brings me to the last part of the presentation, which is about the case studies. I'm going to give you some examples of applications which are already installed. The first one is about a mobile phone provider. We actually have several of those. You can imagine in a retail environment where you are selling a phone and the service, the complexity of the menu and the catalog is quite vast. And often the people who work in the shop are not updated with the latest information, and they don't know all the details to be able to help the customer. The customer comes into the shop as a very large array of products and services, and they don't know what to select and what, compared to their needs. So what these telecom operators do, they use a multi-touch. In this case, it was actually a table kind of setting with a multi-touch display sitting embedded into a table. And the sales assistant is able to use the multi-touch system in a very intuitive way, collaborating with the customer, showing easily the options available. Because it's all digital content, the software can be updated. So when the plans are changing, everything can be updated very quickly. What it means is the customer is very satisfied. So you can imagine for a telecom operator that's very important because if they are leading telecom operators, they can upgrade their existing customer to buy more content. If they are not a leading telecom operator, they want to build a brand name, and by using actually the sophisticated, more natural user interface system, they're attracting the customer to come and to come back. The same type of application can easily be replicated among car dealers, jewelry shops, clothing, and all kind of retail application where the selection of the product is quite wide and where the catalog does change frequently. Another example which is kind of similar but in a completely different area is a DIY store. This is actually a case in the US where the company wanted to create a point of purchase system to actually showcase their paints. Again, here we have a number of different color scheme and combination of color schemes. The user needed to interact with the display in a simple way and actually see the paint on the screen with very bright colors. So it was not just important the fact that they could easily combine the different colors, but they also wanted to see it in a bright way, and the display being full HD with LED backlight allows the colors to be shown very clearly. So the paint manufacturer wanted to create this interactive point of purchase, and they needed a dynamic message, and they wanted to increase their customer loyalty. And by adding, software that was very intuitive, they were able to actually increase customer loyalty by implementing this kind of device. If we move to another example, which is still in the retail area, now we're talking about a fashion specialty chain. What they wanted to do in this case, it was not really a product selector, but in their child department, the parents come in, they want to select clothes, and the children often they get bored about waiting for the parents to select something, and so obviously the parents don't find it easy to actually select the product because the kids don't want to stay there and so on. So what they did, they created a multi-touch experience for the kids just close to the department, so that the kids can actually be in front of a large display. You can imagine the kids are quite used to operate on an iPhone, an iPad. In any way, it's a very natural gesture because that's what they used to do since they are very little. And they can be entertained on the display. It's multi-touch, so it's multi-user. So if you have 2-3 kids all playing around the display together, it's not a problem. And that again allows the parents to complete the shopping experience and the kids to not get bored, and enhance the branding, because the experience, if you have a good experience in a shop, you're likely to come back in the same shop. Other type of application includes the digital signage. You can combine multi-touch monitors, having multi-users running from the same PC, where you have different images on the displays, but you have multiple users, and really attracting the experience and making the experience much more interactive for the user. So you can imagine in areas like airports, where you have a lot of people passing by, they need to be attracted by the message. You make it interactive, so if you have many multi-touch displays, it's really attractive, and then they all run in the same applications, but because it's multi-touch, multi-user, you can make each display operate different applications and make each user almost independent from each other. Hospitality is another area, of course, where multi-touch can be applied, in a self-service area, or where you do need to do a check-in, things like that. And we move into other areas which are still within the retail area, but are more concerning the productivity of the people working, for example, in the security area. Here, typically, you have buttons, mechanical buttons, which are not easy and intuitive to use. What you do, you could have multiple display. Again, you can zoom in into the details and control and make control the picture in a very intuitive way. So, to finish the presentation, very briefly, what 3M offers in terms of multi-touch display is an array of desktop display, which you actually can see on our stand, 18-inch, 21.5-inch, 24, and 27. The 18-inch to 24-inch can actually support 20 touches in less than 6 milliseconds, so very reactive, so the experience is very interesting. They all have this virtual bezel and this industrial design. The 27-inch actually supports 40 touches, being a larger display. You can start to have more people collaborating with each other. The 21 to 27-inch are full HD, which means the picture is very nice. And finally, what we have is a chassis line, which is really products you can integrate inside a table or a kiosk and so on, up to 32-inch. Again, the 32-inch is full HD, 40 touches, and can give you, can be integrated inside a table or can be wall-mounted. If you need more details, my email address is down there, or you can go to www.3m.com/multitouch. Thank you very much. If there are any questions. Thank you.